Hi everyone, Shulagh Jacobs here with Erkan Ali, and hope you all had a lovely Christmas. This is a bit of an impromptu call. We just decided to get together and really have a rundown of our highs and lows of 2020 because it's been such a roller coaster year, and we haven't really prepared much. We're just going to dive straight in,
We
rewind.
normally do. Preparation
Yeah,
is
we
in the
do. We do a
years and
bit,
years
don't
of
we?
study. The preparation's in the years and years of study. So it's the 27th of December. So we're between Eves, Christmas and New Year's Day, I suppose, or Eves as we call it. And I think we're coming to the end. We're coming to the end of 2020, and I think we wanted to kind of sum up the year. So, what do you remember of coming into 2020 from 2019?
Well, I came into 2020 on a bit of a high because I'd reached a really good point in my business. At the end of January, I turned 50. So, I'd really planned a year of dancing and celebrating and hang that out for as long as I possibly could. And obviously continue the success I was having with the business. In March, just the beginning of March, went on holiday to Norfolk with my family, which was great, kind of properly reconnecting with them. We had a lovely week walking along the beach, and it was at that point when the coronavirus stuff kind of first really started going apeshit in the mainstream media. And that was when I kind of twigged, this looks like this is going to start being a real thing.
But if I'm correct, at that time you weren't overly researched, were you? You were kind of came into
No,
research. You were
no.
like you were still in that mainstream
I was still a
narrative.
normie at that point.
You was definitely Normieville, weren't you?
Yeah.
Mm.
I was kind of blinkered. And I think as well, where I had struggled business wise over the years, you tend to block everything else out. And it's just a case of survival. And you don't think about, because you're so focused on that thing, everything else is like a distraction.
Or as people say, the rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Yeah, plenty of those. So
What's your recollection of that point? So January,
I just don't
February,
want to
before
come
this
over
took it.
too. I don't want to come over too prophetic because I've been saying this sort of stuff for years. And my wife used to say to me, at some point you'll probably be right. So for me, I thought 2019 was an awful year. I think we had kind of Brexit heating up. We had an election that kind of kept on. I think it was November. It just felt like a year of stop starts. Didn't get into the flow of anything. And towards the end of 2019, basically closed up 2 businesses that year. It was an awful year. I just couldn't wait to get out of 2019. I couldn't wait. I was like, 2020, here we come. New start, new beginning. 2020 had been a year that we'd when I was a leader at Landmark Education. 2020 was a year we always focused in terms of creating the future 2020. So it's had some fallouts in terms of 2020 vision, hope for the future. It was a real milestone time. And I think when you're younger, I mean, before the 2000s, 2020 felt like a really, like a long way away. And again, like you said, you were 50. I was 52 in July, and I was pitching my wife this idea of we should get out. I'm saying we've got to get out. I know things are going to turn. I think we've got a collapse, financial collapse in the pipeline. I think while the going's good, let's cash our chips in and get off grid and get self-sufficient. And I remember us having conversations about, about the kids' schools and what about, our lives here, and if we do go elsewhere, what's it going to be like? And all the. And I'm just saying, we just have to get out. We have to get out of here. And that's how I started 2020. With finishing 2019, I should say. Probably not like it was like an end of year thing. It'd been going on for about 4 years, 5 years. I think since 2014, I'd kind of thought, really we've got to get out and get out of the monetary system, the debt, the infinite growth, debt-based paradigm, and get into a lifestyle of self-sufficiency and get out of money and get into intrinsic, which I'll say more about as we go along. But that's kind of where I was. And the resistance I got from my wife at the time was, I like the idea, but I thought we'd do it in 10 years. What about if you're wrong? I think you're running away. You're running away from reality, to go live this dream off grid or whatever. So it's a lot of personal concerns and also, if you like, macro concerns. So that's kind of where I was in the beginning of 2020. And I kind of really lost focus on career. Like, what do I do for a living? I've just been a business coach and consultant for like 10, 12 years. I've run businesses my whole life. And I just thought business is dead. It's finished for the SME. I thought, when I say finished, obviously, there's loads of exceptions to that rule, but I could just see small business not thriving. And I had seen it for a long time, but being more and more squeezed, whether it's through the banks, through local authorities, through minimum wage, through HR, through compliance, through health and safety. You just, growing up in business, I just saw all this encroachment into the margins of what it took to keep a small business going. So my market and my enthusiasm to help people build their businesses had gone in a way that I'd always more interested in the people than I was in the businesses. But I could also see, well, what we're doing, getting people to buy more pizzas, getting to buy another car. What are we really doing here? And I've been saying for a while is how much sense is there in an infinite growth debt-based paradigm? You're gonna burn it. It's burned out already. I mean, I thought it burned out maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Probably 2008, 2009, it already burnt out, and they did all the quantitative easing. So they just prolonged the inevitable. But we've got in a debt-based infinite growth model, you're going to burn out. You can't keep creating more debt than there is money, and the cycle, it's going to burn out. It's going to crash. It can't do anything else but that, and that's the design of it. So that kind of long answer to a short question, but I was kind of a lot of revelations, and I think for me, before the COVID era, it was like I felt a panic coming on. Like, we've got to do something. We should do something soon. Like, we've got to get out of here before we can't get out of it. That's where I was.
So what were your thoughts when it first kind of came into like the mainstream news?
Well, I did a video on the 23rd of March in the car. Those of you interested can find it on our YouTube channel, saying what I think's coming. And I got a lot of ridicule for it, and I got a lot of people saying, "Who do you think you are to scaremonger people?" And I was talking about things like, wealth buy-ins, compulsory vaccinations, and what's the other, universal basic income. The encroachment of government, more and more overreach. I think it's a good term. Overreach. More and more compliance. More and more being told what to do, when to do it. Did I think we'd end up where we are now? I didn't. I couldn't imagine this, but I knew things were definitely going to get. Because we knew about. People being chipped and tracked, and been talking about 5G for years. Now we talk about ID, 2020 passports. We're talking about vaccine. The COVID era. I guess I feel speechless, really. What surprised me the most, Shulagh, is how the threshold of the ordinary person who's not been off mainstream, to whatever you show them, whatever you say, they still go, "You're just a conspiracy nut," or you're just where's your credibility? It's always like, Reuters is always trusted, BBC is trusted, Sky is trusted, all the mainstream history channels and science channels and doctors are all trusted. Yeah, because they're not researched in these areas, they haven't had the chance to really work out who is saying what and what can be considered credible. So they just go to default. So it's always a measure against that mainstream, and it's an onslaught of terabytes of data being driven down the channel. and a lot of it's been repetitive. It's very dumbed down. It's very simplified. It's boiled down to basic nuts and bolts and sound bites. We've been trained on sound bites for 34 years. So people kind of go, "Oh, just give it to me in a nutshell," and you're like, "No, it doesn't. It doesn't really work that way. Because if I give it to you in a nutshell, you're going to go, don't talk rubbish." You know?
Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest revelations for me. And again, going back to March when I first reconnected with you, I think it was literally the week I got back from Norfolk when I was realising that this was something very much out of the ordinary compared to what I'd experienced. And I knew there was something very, very wrong going on. And I think you gave me a load of links. And I went from like 0 to conspiracy hero in the space of about 2 weeks.
Yeah, but you know, people like you, Shulagh, have given me hope. Because I've been doing this for decades. And people ask things, and then you give them links. And did you watch it? Oh no, it's 2 hours long, or it's an hour long. And I'm like, well, you sit and watch 4 films in a row, or you watch Netflix, on repeat on your box sets, but you won't sit and watch something that's about your freedom and what's going on in the world. So I think anyone listening to this that is having similar issues with sharing information with the people around them is just keep sharing. I mean, sometimes I post so many things. I'm throwing mud at the wall, and I'm going, right, if one bit grabs someone's attention and connects the next dot for them, then at least that's something I'm doing to make that difference. And quite often you feel like, you can't measure all the difference you're making or not making because it's out of your purview. You just don't know. But sometimes someone will turn up and go, hey, that I picked that up and it changed the course of my life, and it got me asking questions. And then what I think is also important is that you did it. Nobody made you do it. You didn't do it because I sent you the link. You did it because you were looking, and the links were your next steps in unfolding the narrative or working out what's going on. So I think that's really important, because without that desire, doesn't matter how many links or how many things, it's kind of like being there when the desire comes on, and someone will go, oh, Erkan shares that stuff. Shulagh's been sharing that stuff. Something will get through, like some little nugget of information will get through, or just unseat everything enough for them to open up to maybe something more. So I think
I think it was only that I'd seen you share probably a couple of years beforehand some 9/11 stuff and a few other bits and pieces that just sort of seeped into my consciousness, and it was literally that was the only reason I got back in touch, because you'd shared those things, and I may have watched one of them at the time, but again, it's one of those.
Yeah, but that's what people think. They just and I think there's something I wanted to address a little bit. Is I think people think you watch 1 or 2 YouTube videos and you believe everything you see. There's this kind of you're just. And I mean I've read loads of books. I've watched many talk. I'm really good with hearing things and seeing things. That just seems to work for me. Reading is a struggle for me. If I read, it just takes a long time. Whereas I can have an audio book playing and go through it 3 times in a week. So I think that's the other thing, is find your modality. One of the things we talk about in coaching a lot is, what the modality is. Are you better at reading? Are you better at looking? Do you learn by watching, or do you learn by doing? Do you have dexterity? Is it manual? Whatever. Find your best way to learn. And I think the great thing about YouTube and audio books and seminars and talks, it's a great way to what we call make the most of net time. So you can be listening to a book while you're driving, or while you're cooking, or while you're getting ready in the morning in the shower. So there's loads of ways of bringing the information in. But there are some books that I've got a couple of books here that I wanted to just share. As a way of. So one is this one. Is that backwards, isn't it? So COVID-19 and the agendas to come, Red Pill by James Perloff. Interesting book. And probably more my favourite at the moment is Vernon Coleman's book. And Dr. Vernon Coleman, anyone who tells you vaccines are safe and effective is lying. And I think that's the thing I think most people really struggle with, is the extent of the lies and the deceit and the manipulations. It is I don't know what the biggest word is, like gigantic or enormous or expansive. It kind of, it covers people's consciousness from cradle to grave in a way, because we're brought up in an education system. We're brought up watching the telly. We go to films. We read mainstream. I mean, it's never been easier to get off mainstream. It's never been easier. There's more out there than there ever was, and yet there's the resistance to going off mainstream and going beyond mainstream is still, there's a lot of resistance for people. So they kind of don't know where to start. And I can get that. I can get that as a real concern, because it's like, in my journey, I don't think I ever bought the mainstream, because I was brought up as an ethnic minority. I grew up in a culture that I didn't consider my own. So I was always out of the mainstream. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't feel like I was ever in it in that way. Obviously, there's breakthroughs and enlightenments and things that are revelations, but I'd never felt I was part of that system. I always felt I was outside the school system, because I used to go to Turkish school and I used to go to English school, and neither of them really fit for me. So I was a rebel very early on. But I can imagine if you've heavily invested in your life in academic development, you've been to uni, you've done your mainstream education, and again, I suppose a lot of people that are in the medical industry, that are in the police force, that run the BBC. In fact, someone shared a post this morning that they'd basically been speaking to someone on a dating site who's a police officer, and he said to her that a lot of people don't buy, a lot of the policemen don't buy this, they don't want to enforce it. And she said to him, why don't you step up and say something? And they said, well, we're afraid of losing our jobs. So it's interesting how people are kept in line by the mores and the culture of those organisations and institutions. You don't step out of line. You don't speak against authority. So they're these order followers. So to break yourself free from that level of containment, I think is a remarkable thing. I hadn't really appreciated what it might take someone who isn't well researched out of the mainstream to actually start to consider that everything they've been taught, and I think that's, what is it? Yeah, it's Ike's book. Yeah, it says everything you need to know, but have never been told. And there's other books like Everything You've Been Told Is a Lie. And the more I look at it, and the more I've researched, pretty much everything is a lie. And I know that sounds so conspiratorial, so fantastic. I don't know. I'm struggling with my English language today. I don't think there's words for it. That's why. I don't think it's I can't find a word. I just can't find a word that really lines up how orchestrated the ruse is and how controlled it is.
It's just so pervasive and all-encompassing into literally every nook and cranny of society, and from the top down. And I think that's what people struggle with, because they come at it with this idea of, well, how can everyone be in on it? But the point is, they're not all in on it. No. It's just certain key, because it's a mantra that's just been passed down from, the powers that shouldn't be and the people that run these organizations, and it's just delivered in the form of these policies and like mission statements, and through these various like non-governmental organizations, things like common purpose, when you're talking about the local authorities and policing, because it literally is just in every single corner, every single rock that you look under. And once you see it, you can see it. But if you can't, then it really does take a lot of explaining and research to understand how the lie is upheld.
And I think also it's a big challenge for those of us who've done that research to explain it to people in terms that they can get, because they want it in the terms that they can get. And the point is, you have to come out of that to get it. It's like you can't get it within a a recommendation, guys, is Mark Passio's Decoding of the Matrix trilogy. And this thing's 8-9-year-old talk, and I've been aware of this talk for a long time, right? And there's this whole thing about, you know, the people within the Matrix will even defend it to the death. You know, they are defending their own enslavement, their own acquiescence. You know, they actually defend the system. You know, so imagine a police officer stopping you because you're not wearing a face mask on the tube. You know, and then having that conversation. You know, like, okay, if you said to himself, "Do you know what COVID?" It's like, no, look, I'm just following orders, mate. You should have a face mask on. You've been told you should have one on. Where's your face mask? And you're having that conversation at that level. It's almost like the mind control is spectacular. It's absolutely stunningly spectacular. Because even if he thought that the face mask was a load of BS, he still won't say anything because that's his job. My job, just my job. Just doing my job. Just following orders. So the order followers are a real critical part of this, because they are few and we are many, but between the few and the many, there's this line of the management and the organizing and the authoritarian grouping that keep it in line, in force. And that's what I think is really. I'm amazed at it. You know, you've got to look at it from a point of view of like, wow. You know, could you imagine if we had this much commitment to having a world that works for everyone? We'd have it done by lunchtime, and it's already 11:30. You know what I mean? It would take long.
Yeah.
You know, it's taken years and years and decades of this kind of level of conditioning and control and manipulation and pulling the illusion, you know, the wool that's been pulled over the eyes, as Morpheus would say, to keep people in this narrative. And yet, we could have it. We could resolve poverty. We could live longer. We could grow more food than we need. We'd have it all. I mean, in an instant. I mean, it would take literally nothing. And yet, we live with poverty and wars and disease and fear.
And we know that lockdowns are going to cause even more poverty, probably to a degree that we've never experienced in our lifetimes. And yet people are begging for more.
I'll tell you a story that my mum and dad told me from they got from a relative in Australia. So this lady, middle-aged, probably upper middle-aged lady, Turkish origin, invited her friends round to make some food. It's like a ravioli type food. So usually what happens in Turkish culture is like, oh, we're going to make this food, and everyone comes together, they'll make it and they'll take some home. So they keep each other. It's like a little party. I think there's about 10 of them. Anyway, a neighbour called the police, and the police turned up and gave them all fines and told them to all go home. This is Australia, yeah? I don't know where in Australia, maybe Melbourne, I'm not sure. Anyway, so they made a load of the food. So the lady said to two or three of her friends, look, it's crazy that we're going to waste all this food. Why don't you stay here? We'll cook it and eat it and finish it. Anyway, the neighbour, for some reason, again, called the police. They turned up, and she and her friends, between them, got a $30,000 fine. I think like something like $5,000 or $6,000 each. So, you know, this started to get quite serious. The husband comes home. He's so angry with her, he throws a saucepan at her, hits her on the head, and kills her.
Wow.
He ends up in prison, and she's dead. And I'm like, my mum and dad like telling me this story. I'm like, you couldn't make this up. I mean, would you call that a COVID death? I would.
Yeah.
So people are doing insane things in the pressure cooker of the fear and the way the authorities are creating that pressure. And I mean, there's a good story about how black ants and red ants, if you put the pressure up or the heat up, they start fighting and killing each other. Saw a meme a while back. But it's like that's what's happening. The pressure cooker is getting pressurized. So the stakes are getting more and more significant. It's getting more and more, people are more and more on edge. And I just thought that was probably the most insane. I'm sure we'll see worse. But I was kind of like, wow. And you can imagine the husband's come home, he's got angry with his wife because what are you doing having your friends around? The police have been round twice. They probably can imagine the argument, can't you? Well, all I'm doing is cooking food with my, it's just that the whole thing just is really, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. And there's loads of those tragedies in one way, one form or another. Suicides are up, heart attacks are up. I mean, there's loads of tragedy here, like human tragedy.
Yeah, the human cost of this is just insane.
Domestic violence is up.
And you can't measure it, like you can't put a price on it.
No.
And I think that's what stunned me again, right back at the beginning when we first had to close all our businesses. People were like, well, people are dying. And, they couldn't see outside that little bracket of what the long-term cost of this would be. And there was this kind of fake narrative about having to choose between lives and the economy. And, in their heads, they've got this idea of the economy being all about big banks and that kind of thing, and the stock market. But in reality, economy is people, it's small businesses and it's livelihoods.
Well, I think the other problem is there was a lot of people that were on furlough. So they were like, they didn't have to go to work. They actually had more money than they had when they're working. And they're at home.
And more time.
Remember the weather in March, April, May, June? The weather was incredible. It was like blue. I took the kids out walking and we'd look up. So I said, girls, do you remember I said to you when I was a kid, the sky used to be really blue and the clouds were really white and fluffy? That's how I remember it. I've not seen the sky like that because there was no chemtrails. There was nothing in the sky. Obviously, I couldn't fly the chemtrails. I know, again, but there's a big difference between a chemtrail and a contrail. It's really simple and it's really obvious. But if you have got nothing flying in the air and no weather modification, no weather control, there's still energy. We saw energy, like Hertz type energy waveforms. I saw that, but the air was fresh and cool and the sun was out and it was like beautiful.
Well, a lot of chemtrails up this neck of the woods, particularly like early morning and late at night.
Because we'd see the odd one go through and it'd just be this white line going straight across the sky and then hang there for hours. That's not a contrail. Condensation. It's not condensation. But, don't be stupid.
Well, I would even hear the planes of a night time. Literally sort of between 10 and midnight, you would hear them going over, just this sort of chugging sound. And then you'd wake up and like the air would just be heavy.
The other thing I remember is early days, back in March, is new cell towers going up, 5G towers, showing up all over the place overnight. They'd be going out and the contractors are out there putting these things up. And even more lately, I've been seeing in and around London, kind of very different looking type of a new iteration of a cell tower, probably 5G, 4G, whatever they are. So that again was another thing that we started to see, that in the world of what is essential work, you can still get a speeding fine and a parking ticket, and 5G towers are still going up. Yet people who are hairdressers and beauticians and people who run restaurants and bars and hospitality has been decimated. Hospitality has been, I think in my mind, anything that gets people together, socializing and talking has been attacked outright. Absolutely no way we're going to let people sit around talking or gathering.
Or anything that causes joy. Obviously the dancing and anything that contributes to people's well-being, because they tried to crush the gyms, but I think the gyms were like the only industry that really had any kind of pushback.
And they did really well, didn't they? Somehow the gyms managed it, but I don't know, was it the pubs? And there was hairdressers, beauticians, anything personal service style, absolutely decimated. How do they come back from that? Some of these bits, I don't know the statistics, but most businesses in 2019 probably just getting by. So if you just wanted to, the metaphor I use is like you're smothering someone with a pillow. They're already they're in hospital bed, and you just come up with a pillow and you're just finishing them off. It actually doesn't take that much.
No, it doesn't.
But yeah, a cousin of mine works for main agent dealership, sells cars, I think this was in October. He said to me, they've never been so busy. So people, because they haven't been going out to restaurants and bars and events and blah, 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 and they've been stuck at home, maybe on furlough, maybe retired, so they've still got their pension, they've been going out and buying brand new cars. Because they'd be like, well, you know, if it's all going to go Pete Tong, we might as well get that new car. And he said that, you know, we've never been so busy. DIY. I mean, you drive down the road, how many tradesmen's vans do you see? People getting their houses done up.
Well, that's it. I mean, back in kind of March, April, the garden centres and places like that were closed as well. People were begging for them to be reopened. And I think those places, once they did reopen, were absolutely mobbed. I mean, looking back, if there was one thing that I was grateful for, it was that period did give me a chance to kind of thrive creatively. And having done all that research, I could actually, rather than just be a consumer of information, I could actually do something with it. And to have that time and space to really sort my head out without the pressure that you normally have of, you know, trying to run the business and, you know, stay afloat. It was a little bit of respite, which was much needed.
What about?
I think a lot of people have.
Sorry, carry on.
I think a lot of people have found that, and having, you know, enjoyed that side of lockdown, they now don't want to go back to reality.
Well, I was going to kind of go, yeah, take it from there. It's like the thought of going out to a pub now, I can't be bothered. Or restaurant. It's like we've been
programmed.
Yeah, like, you know, like I remember, and I don't want to sound like an alky here, is I remember I'd go to, you know, when I lived in, I used to live in the town centre, I would go to the pub 2 or 3 times a week, just pop in for one, have a chat with a couple of people, and it was a way of letting off the day's stress, have a giggle, hear a joke, have a moan about something, and then go home with a little, you know, a little rosy glow, make dinner for the kids, and have a giggle, go to bed. You know, and imagine all that way that we dissipate the stresses, and I think there's something like social interaction. We're social beings. We want to be around people that make us laugh and think and piss us off at the same time, and then go home pondering stuff. And you know, there's months and months of people breaking out of those. And in England, you know, in England, we're a nation of pubs and a nation of shops. Both of that, you know, we say like England's a nation of shopkeepers. Well, our shops are decimated and our pubs have been absolutely destroyed. You know, how pubs are going to come back, and under what guise, that you can't go to the pub unless you've had your injection. I mean, we can get onto the vaccine because obviously that came along later, much later in 2020. But kind of like, you know, there was this phase where you just had to avoid people 2 meters apart, and then suddenly it was, you know, the mask was like, oh, masks are ineffective, you don't need to wear them. In fact, 2020, I think it was March the 15th, the coronavirus was downgraded for a high consequential disease, down to just a normal illness. And yet suddenly we've seen overreach and creep, you know, from distancing and staying indoors to then putting the masks on, and now it's, you know, the injections were rolled out, I think, a couple of weeks ago when we did the last show we did, and people are lining up for it. And this is a vaccine, or I don't call it a vaccine generally, I just say that so people understand what I'm talking about, but an injection, because they're unlike anything we've ever had before. They haven't had the testing, they haven't had the animal testing, they've not had the long-term, you know, it takes 10 years. For 6 to 10 years to get a vaccine out, and we've had the flu jab for 60, 70 years, 65 years, and it still doesn't cure people of the flu. So people are lining up for this, and the makers are completely indemnified, i.e. they can't be held liable or responsible. The government has indemnified itself. The doctors, I'm not sure where this is at the moment, but the doctors are saying, well, if we've got to give people this injection, we want indemnification. So no one wants to take responsibility for it. And ultimately, if you take it, it's completely at your own risk.
But if you dare criticise it or even ask a question.
Yeah, you're an anti-vaxxer. And I tell you, I mean, I think you need to read these things if you're interested, guys. I mean, this is a fantastic, Dr. Coleman's book about anyone who tells you vaccines are safe and effective, because it gives you a more formal way of understanding the challenge and how to maybe rebut people when they start talking about, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer, because they've been programmed to say anti-vaxxer. They've been programmed to say you're a conspiracy theorist. They've been programmed to say you're some kind of loony, mad person. Because every time they bring someone, I mean, Piers Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn's brother, Piers Corbyn, was on telly not long ago, and they just introduced him as a nutter, as an idiot. And I think they just bring him on to ridicule him. And I've got to rate the guy for even approaching the mainstream stuff. And they don't listen to anything he says. They just bombard him. And I think at one point they had an interview with him with 3 people bombarding him. I mean, that's not an interview. That's not ethical. That is, to me, that is quite sinister. And what will happen is the unthinking person, or the unaware, or the person who's not really on point, is going to go, bloody conspiracy. That's all bollocks. What are they talking about? And that's it.
Yeah, it's this idea that you're either one side or the other. There are no shades of grey in between. You can't have a complex, nuanced opinion.
Do you know, I've been watching some old 70s and old talk shows, and you see how they were talking back then, when they had a guest on, or they were talking about, more academic or more nuanced subjects. They'd be on for about an hour and a half having the conversation. Where'd you get that kind of... We've got more content now coming from the mainstream than ever. But when do you see people actually having an in-depth conversation? And I don't like the word balance. I think that's BS. But some, being able to challenge the big mainstream narrative in a way that is actually respected and valued. You wouldn't even get... I mean, even the BBC reporters have said they can't challenge the vaccine narrative. They've been told they can't touch it, for orders on high. So how is someone who's watching the BBC don't realise that in that narrative, that there are conversations and information outside of it, and they're not even aware, and they don't trust it because it's not inside that. So it's a real dichotomy. I can get why it's difficult for them. I don't know if I respect it, but I can get it. It kind of go, okay, fine. And then the other thing I've heard people saying, oh, this was. I had a friend of mine recently leave me a voice message, and he said, "Look, he goes like, you've got quite a bit of bravado around the mask wearing. I think it just sounds like I'm all right, Jack, and just because you probably won't get ill and die from it, if I can save one elderly person's life by extend their life by 6 months, I feel like I've done something good." And I said, well, considering you've been programmed to think that, now that comes over really kind of weird, right? But I said, well, ask yourself, what is COVID-19? How is it identified? What is the value of wearing a mask? Why is the vaccine here? Whose interests does it represent? How have other organisations been funded by, say, Bill and Melinda Gates, Imperial College, BBC, how many the World Health Organization? Look at the testing, look at the liabilities of vaccine. Then ask me why I'm saying you shouldn't wear a mask and why the vaccines aren't a good idea. But you send that information. I don't know. I haven't followed it. I haven't heard from him in a while. All I got was, good questions. I went, well, I've got the answers, I think. Why don't you work it out? Why I'm not wearing a mask until... And I said to him, what? So you've known me for 20-something years, and you think I'm a selfish person? Because again, they've been taught that your freedom is now selfish. You're being selfish and you don't care about people. And I'm being virtuous and I'm saving an old person's life by wearing a face mask. I said, no, you're not. You're doing yourself damage and you're making no difference to them. None. In fact, you're making it worse for everyone because you're wearing a mask.
And given that science is meant to be all about the measurable, being able to prove a result, the idea of just randomly saying that you've managed to save someone's life by wearing a mask, like, how can you actually prove that?
No, there's no studies to say that. In fact, the studies saying that masks do harm to the wearers and doesn't reduce the spread of, if there is an infection working the way they say it does. It doesn't do any of that. But no, you can't say that because, well, they're all wrong and you're right. Yeah, it's true. It's
the Danish study that did come out pretty much debunked masks as being having any efficacy at all, and that
Even
was censored.
even the World Health Organization, WITI, and all of them at the beginning were saying, "Whilst now we'll never masks are a waste of time; they don't make any benefit." And now they go, "Put your masks on, stay 5 meters apart, 10 meters, well, 2 meters apart, wash your hands." And then you see people how they're wearing them. I mean, we've covered some of this. You know, they wear them under the nose, they take them off, they put them on, they touch them all the time, they put them in their pockets, they put them back on again, they wear it the next day, and you say, "Well, hold on, if this is a contagious fabric or item." You know, there are protocols to managing contagion, and where the biohazard bins. And I'm like, it's like me saying, what about building 7? You know, it fell in its own footprint, and a plane didn't even hit it. And people go, "Oh, you're such a conspiracy." What answer the question? You know, why did building 7 drop? And it was announced 20 minutes, half hour before by the BBC. I mean, come on. No, don't be stupid. That never happened. You're like, okay.
So moving on.
You know, sorry.
That was kind of March, April, and then we kind of moved into the summer, and it was obvious that this wasn't going to go away anytime soon. What was going through your head?
Let's get out of here. Go. You know, get out. I've been wanting to get out for a long time. I don't want to go into my personal situations because I think it's
No, of course.
complex. But I think I've known this for ages, but I kind of like become even more apparent. You know, how do you protect against the possibility of a vaccine? We haven't even talked about the World Economic Forum talking about taking all our possessions off us and writing off debt. We knew that's coming anyway. I mean, wealth buy-ins, but essentially, you know, this is poverty. I mean, again, on the 23rd, I did the video, and I said this is poverty for all. This is poverty for everyone now. So those in the middle classes, those who own their businesses, they've been pretty much insulated from poverty, and they've worked hard. Some of them, I'd say probably a lot of them. Anyone who's got their own business, small business, SME type businesses, had to work hard, had to take risks, has had to borrow money probably, and they've made the most of the markets they're in. So yeah, those businesses, those would be my prime clients. So they're you know, how do you walk in and coach a business knowing what's going on without saying what's going on? And that's where I think a lot of the coaching industry and the consultancy industry is way off the piste, way off. If they really care about people and they really care about the world, they should be saying to their clients, this is an attack on your wealth. This is going to be a wealth grab coming. If they don't know these things, then the whole personal development movement for me is a shambles. It's a shambles. And I know people say, yeah, but if you get more confidence and you improve your communication and you develop your leadership skills and your management skills and you know, that's a good thing. No, it doesn't make any difference because you're not doing anything to alter what's going on in the world. You're just doing what you need to do to survive. And I think that's a big part of the problem. I think the personal development industry has been obsessed with buy a bigger house, get more business, set up your next branch, franchise. But that's all within the infinite debt-based growth paradigm, infinite growth debt-based paradigm. What I haven't done is said our monetary system sucks. The reason we're suffering depression is because X, Y, and Z. And now what's happening, if you like, the curtain's been revealed. They're still talking about you need to get into crypto. That's where we've got to go now, crypto. Make wealth on crypto. Buy gold. Now, I get that as a survival strategy. Great. But what about actually waking enough people up to the fact that what's happening, why you need those strategies is because of the attack on humanity? They don't talk about that. The stars don't talk about it. The celebrities don't talk about it. Where are they? Where are all these film stars and pop stars that we admire so much as a society? Where are they? That's the thing that I find just absolutely abhorrent. Almost worse than being absolute. If you're absolutely naive and you're nescient and you have no idea, then, you know, forgive them, they don't know what they do. But if you do have an idea what's coming and you still play in the narrow road to stay compliant, and I know coaches like that, loads of them, pretty much most. I fell out with many of them a long time ago because they're not going to say what needs to be said. They're not. They don't have the. They don't have that depth. They don't have the understanding, and they don't have the courage for it. They don't have the. I was going to say something else, but they don't.
Or do you think they don't have the vision either?
About people, oh, I've done research, and then, well, if you've done research, then why are you still doing what you're doing? You know, it's like, really, exposing the system for what it is probably the biggest cause we have, and that's a duty. Forget a bigger house and more money, and you know, I'm not a crypto fan. I'm not a digital fan. I think it's a dead end. But then I'm not an expert in that area. But maybe for some will win. I've no doubt, and I'm sure some businesses will win in this era. But a lot will lose. A lot will lose. A lot. Our society as a whole is going to lose, and people aren't talking about that. We're nearly 12 o'clock, aren't we?
Yeah.
So we'll make this one not too long. Listen, I mean, if you're listening to this, make your own mind up. Don't believe me. Don't believe Shulagh. You know, work it out for yourself. This isn't a doom and gloom. You know, it's not. I'm not doom and gloom. I'm a very positive, optimistic person, but also I like to think I'm grounded in reality. So for me, get as close to reality. There's no two sides to reality. There's just interpretations that agree or don't agree. But reality is reality. What happens in reality is what's happening in reality. You know, I know we can get metaphysical and the observer can change the reality and all that. Yeah, we do. We do change our reality by the way we look at it. But there is a reality out there of what's happening right now. And Agenda 21, Agenda 30, the World Economic Forum are good places to look. Go back to Beyond Mainstream and just see what we've been posting, you know, and then work it out for yourself, what you think is happening and why. That's my message. In fact, in terms of 2021, my main message is be on guard. Be on guard. You know, really, now's not the time to be checking out, watching Netflix. Do your research and work out your strategies, because I think things are going to change a lot quicker in 2021 than they did in 2020. You know, and I think now we've got vaccines out as well. We're going to see a lot more restrictions in where people can and can't go. Possibly travel is going to be highly restricted. I think also with the corporations are getting in on it as well. So Ticketmaster and people and organisations like that and airlines are going to say you can't come on our plane, you can't come into our stadium, you can't buy a ticket to this event because where's your vaccine? So people say to me, I'm not going to get a vaccine. I say, oh, you will. Oh, you will, because there's going to be something you don't care about. You might not care about football, but you might care about getting to Australia because your family's there. Or you may have a heart attack and they won't come unless you've got your vaccines up to date. They won't send you an ambulance. So they're not going to make you do it, but they're going to make it very difficult for you not to do it. And that includes all, you know, me and Shulagh and everyone listening to this, is that vaccine now is a tool for control. It's the narrative. It's a virus cover story for control. And I think the sooner people realise that, the better. So I haven't got a positive message other than stay alert, pay attention. That's my message. That's what I think. And get a plan. Get a plan. Stay alert, pay attention, and make a plan. So what I mean by that, sorry, Shulagh, I'm going to do this and I'll hand over to you, is if your water gets cut, what's your plan? If your electricity gets cut, what's your plan? If there's food shortages and you can't get food, what's your plan? If you run out of money, what's your plan? Who do you go to? Where do you go? Who are your go-to people? Who are the people around you that you're going to help, or they're going to help you? So your community, and it doesn't have to be big people. It could be a group of 5, 6, 7 people. It doesn't have to be big, but what's your plan? So pay attention, be on guard, and have a plan. And really ask your questions. Ask these questions. If electricity goes, what's my plan? If they cut the gas supply, what's your plan? Now, World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab has already warned us there's going to be attacks on the grids. Now, he's called them terrorist attacks and cyber attacks. But what it's code for, electricity is going to get cut. Water is going to get cut. Gas is probably going to get cut. Food shortages. What is your plan? So I'm going to recommend another book, and I haven't got too deep into this one yet. And it's written by Tess Pennington, The Prepper's Blueprint, a step-by-step guide to help you prepare for any disaster. Now, it sounds a little bit dramatic, but think where we were 2019, this time last year and where we are now. So that's me done. I've got much more to add to that. Over to you.
Yeah, preparation is definitely part of this. We've had enough clues about what might be coming down the road to have a fair idea of what we should be getting in place right now. I think it is important to have the right people around you, for sure, to know as much as you can and just question the inconsistencies, because they're there. I mean, people keep coming to me and they want that kind of one link or that one report that's going to kind of tick all the boxes and answer all the questions, but the whole thing is a jigsaw, a huge one, and a lot of the information that you want is hidden away in the small print, the little paragraphs that no one bothers to read. And that's where some of these YouTube presenters have done a fantastic job, because they are the ones who have been doing all this work for years and years and years. And although people discredit them, you know, they've got the source documents, they've got the links, and the references are all there. So this isn't just stuff that they've made up. It's all documented. And it is a lifetime of work putting all this stuff together, and you can't expect to assimilate that in literally just an hour or a couple of hours worth of reading. You just can't. But look at the mainstream media and you will start to see, look at it with a critical eye, and you will start to see the gaps in the story and where those inconsistencies are, and that's your way in.
I want to leave one last message, and it ain't one of hope. Sorry, guys. Central bank digital currencies. I think that's the thing we're going to see probably first quarter, maybe a bit after that. I don't know. I'm not a specialist on it, but I don't think it's going to be long before we've got central bank digital currencies. In other words, our fiat currency is going to turn to digital central bank currency. So that means every penny you spend, everything you do, where you go, is totally trackable, seeable, and switch offable. So I think we're going to see the death of cash in 2021, as in paper cash.
I think that's not too far away.
I've been in so many stores where they don't want cash. I'm like, really? I thought cash was king. What happened to that? And they just look at you like, well, COVID. And also, look, keep challenging people. So if they say you COVID, I say to them, what's that? And then look at them. They don't know what it is. So listen, on that note, take your pleasure where you find it. I think that's the only thing I can say, is enjoy as much of your life as you can right now. Things are going to change, and adapt and grow and develop and learn. And I think the more people understand what's going on, the quicker and easier we can transform this. So if that's a positive message, that's the one I'm leaving for the end of 2020.
Well, I think it's the most important one, really, to know that this isn't completely a done deal. And if enough people have that awareness, then we can turn it around. Because if we haven't got some hope, then where are we, really?
There used to be two. There used to be two hopes. One was Bob, but he's gone.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen. Thank you, everyone who has watched the Beyond Mainstream channel. I know we've got a small audience. I know we haven't done much for a while. But you know what? Whatever it is you think you want to do to support and make the difference out there, do it. Because as long as you're doing it, it all compounds. It all comes together. We're doing our bit. You do your bit, and in 2021 we'll have new guests and new playlists that we're working on, and share, subscribe, feedback, let us know what you made of it, and peace.
Yeah, thank you for watching, and we will see you in 2021.
Bye.